Hello, welcome back to Jump To It for IrishRacing.com and our weekend preview, looking at some top action from Cheltenham Festival Trials Day. Of course, plenty of interesting races to discuss. We're also going to look at Doncaster, race at Fairyhouse on Saturday, and go over to Ireland at Naas on Sunday. And joining me once again, as ever, we have bettingexpert.com's Stephen Harris, we have Ed Quigley and Vincent Finegan from Irish Racing. Now, chaps, I know this is a tipping show, but last week our tips didn't really go very well. Not one winner between our experts, but hopefully we'll get to some actual better tips later on in the show. But Stephen, I want to start with you and talking about Festival Trials Day. You're a little bit disappointed actually about the horses that have been declared so far.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this before, weren't we? It's going to be good ground at Cheltenham, which I'd have thought in January is probably unheard of. Venetia Williams actually on Twitter earlier saying that she's not had a runner this week hardly, and I think she's only got a couple entered up over the weekend. It stopped raining. I think it's been the driest January for 25 years in the south, so that has undoubtedly affected the field sizes at Cheltenham. I don't think we're going to see many horses that are going to be winning in March running on Saturday. Maybe in Ireland we will, but I think Cheltenham are going to be pretty disappointed by the standard of some of these graded races.
Obviously, we were last week bigging up Lingfield as well, the Winter Million. So, I mean, how much do you think that has actually had an impact then on who we're going to see this weekend?
Yeah, well, it's a small pool of top-class horses. It's particularly in the UK. I mean, there's very limited number of trainers who've got any hope of winning these races. Henderson, Nichols, and maybe a sort of Kim Bailey horse or two. But it's a small pool, and it's getting divided ever thinner with lots of possible races to run in ever closer together. I mean, the Lingfield Million was a really good day's racing. It'll be one of the rare occasions it takes place because Lingfield's usually under 6 foot of water in January. But it's a welcome addition, but I think it has diluted the quality elsewhere, predictably.
All right, well, let's move on to potentially some value at least. Ed, let's take us through the first race we want to talk about, the 155 at Cheltenham. So, of course, the aptly named, or catchy named, Paddy Power Cheltenham Countdown Podcast, Handicap Chase. Take us through it.
Yeah, tricky one, isn't it? Kind of fans' favourite Cool Cody will be back for more here, 11 years young. Never seems to really run a bad race over this C&D, but advancing years up to marker 147 might have it against him. I think maybe Stephen's going to have a more convincing kind of case later on in the tips for the week, but I'm finding this very, very tricky, if truth be told. I'm very happy to sit this one out as things stand. I mean, Fairyhouse is the horse I think could be better than his current mark, shall we say. But again, I mean, Stephen did allude to it, the ground here at Cheltenham, it's not rained for a week here. I think the temperatures are supposed to get up into around 13, 14 degrees Friday and Saturday, blue skies. I mean, it's officially good to soft at the time of recording. There's going to be more good in it than anything I would have thought by race day. And Fairyhouse is a horse loves it when the mud's flying. So the ground has kind of scuppered things here, if truth be told, and I'm kind of going around in circles with it. On soft ground, I think Fairyhouse is the progressive type who's clearly better than 137. Whether Fairyhouse is better than 137 on good ground, I've got my suspicion they might not even run him if the ground really dries up that much. So all in all, bit of a head scratcher, and I'm going to keep those splinters on my backside and sit on the fence for this one, Joe.
Well, Ed, as you've alluded to, Stephen's tip for that race is coming up later on in the show. But Stephen, we'll hand over to you now as well, looking at the big race from Saturday, the Cotswold Chase, of course, Gold Cup trial in name. But do you actually see any of these horses actually going on to the big one in March?
No. I mean, it's a straight match, this. I mean, it's a very disappointing turnout. There's two realistic contenders. Chantry House, not a horse I've ever particularly liked. He won the Mast Chase last year when the odds-on favourite Envoy Alan fell. I don't think that form's worth a fiver. And then he came home alone at Aintree when Chamblou was over the top. So I think he's a horse who's got a very high rating for not actually doing a lot. He won a match at Sandown where the other runner didn't run a race at all, the big breakaway. He was beaten after a mile. And then last time he ran for about a mile himself in the King George, never looked happy and pulled up after halfway. So he's got a lot to prove after that. But, I mean, he's a realistic contender. He's going to be a short price favourite, I would have thought. But I much prefer the claims here of Simply the Bets, who ex-Harry Whittington, 3 runs for Nichols. I think Nichols is on record saying that he doesn't do anything flash at home, and he probably needed the run first time and then disappointed second time, never really going. But he bounced right back to his best. There was good money around for him in the week before the race in that big handicap on New Year's Day. And I thought he finished a really good second behind Vienna Court. That was a cracking effort. I know it's only a handicap, and people will think, well, is he just a handicapper now against a proper grade winner, a top grade winner in Chantry House? But I suspect simply the bets will love the good ground. And Nichols is on record as saying he thinks he wants good ground. I think he's probably just coming right. Nichols is sort of hitting a hot spell again now after a quiet January. And in a complete match for me, I think simply the bets will be better value. There's a couple of other runners. I think, softer ground. He's a northern plodder. Cato Rico's older than you, Joe. And Santini is slower than you, Joe. So I do think it's a match. It's a straight match. And I think simply the bets is the one to side with.
Well, Stephen, good to get your digs in nice and early. But now, Ed, we're going to move on to you now. The next race, we're going to talk about the Cleeve Hurdle. Take us through this. Another short price favourite in this one, but what do you make of it?
Yeah, well, a lot of eyes will be on Champ, won't they? Horse, of course, who holds one of the best pieces in Novice Chase form at recent times when he beat Manila, Indo and Allaho in the RSA Chase a couple of seasons back. I mean, that really is outstanding form, isn't it? Well documented. He has all sorts of issues with his back. He's had little niggly injuries, and his kind of jumping fell apart, didn't it, towards the back end of last season, as we saw in the Gold Cup. Back over hurdles on a retrieval mission. Well, it's hard to crab what he did in the long walk, wasn't it? He jumped, he travelled, and he saw off some pretty good horses in the form like Time Hill, Paisley Park, Thomas Darby, etc. He did it very nicely. I'm just not totally bought on the comeback story of Champ at the moment. You know, he is 10 now. I know he's slightly race for his age, but I'd just like to see a little bit more evidence, just because he's a horse who's clearly been hard to keep sound. And I just wonder whether backing up his races, doing it on a consistent basis, is going to be his forte, if you see what I'm saying. So, look, he looks the obvious one. On figures, he's the obvious one, but his price reflects that. Paisley Park, again, another 10-year-old. We're talking about, I've got a lot of horses here who are, would say, the twilight of their careers, but they're not getting any better necessarily. And I'd be tempted to perhaps take them both on with McFabulous with Drying Ground. This is a half brother to Waiting Patiently. It's a bit of a quirky sort, but does absolutely love a sound surface. And I don't think traipsing around in a bog's been helping this horse. He had a little setbacks why he missed the first half of the season, but it was really encouraging. He's run over 2.5 at the Cheltenham meeting on New Year's Day, where he kind of stayed on strongly up the hill that day behind Stormy Island. That form in itself is not good enough to win this race. But I think on drying ground, up to 3 miles, Nichols' team hitting top gear, I just think he's the younger, fresher legs. I think he's about 5-1? You're talking Champ around 2s on. I think he could just be the value call for a bit of an upset here. I'm just not totally sold on this, the Champ is totally back and is the kind of leading light for the Stayers hurdle yet. Albeit, as I said, on figures, he should win. So another little bit of a muddling affair. But McFabulous will be a tentative selection for myself.
Good stuff. All right, we'll move on next to the next race at Cheltenham, the last we're going to actually feature kind of more in-depth today, and that's the 340. So it's listed as the Ballymores Novice Hurdle. Stephen, take us through this. Some of the horses at the top of the rating or top of the weights here have actually got some decent form by the looks of things.
Yeah. I mean, Hillcrest is going to be a very short price favourite. I think he's about £17 clear on official ratings. He's a lovely galloper. He's going to be a lovely 3-mile chaser. Henry Daly's actually got some nice young horses this season, and this is very much one of them. He won here on soft ground from a really good front-running ride at the last meeting. I do slightly have my doubts as to what that amounts to. The runner-up there, I Am Maximus, who was a horse with a big reputation at the start of the season. He did plenty wrong. He didn't jump fluently, and he pulled quite hard under Nico, and he still threw down a big challenge up the straight to Hillcrest, who then got the stands rail and pulled out more. I rather doubt Hillcrest is worth his rating, to be honest with you. And I'm going to go for Balco Coastal here of Nicky Henderson, who Henderson thinks is a graded horse. He holds him in high regard. He wants decent ground. Now this one's flown round Huntingdon this season really impressively. That latest win, he beat a horse of Dan Skelton, who's held in the highest regard, he's won since. So it's good form. I think Balco Coastal will appreciate this step up in trip, and he'll definitely like the ground. Whereas Hillcrest, I think, is a resolute galloper, a thorough stayer, and I think Balco Coastal might do him for pace. And certainly at the prices, I'd imagine that Hillcrest is going to be a very short price looking at the ratings.
Well, definitely a race worth keeping an eye on for sure. Now we're going to go back to Ed and over to Doncaster. We're going to be looking at the Lightning Novices Chase, a race that was won obviously last year by Shishkin of all horses. But Ed, take us through it. Only 3 declared at this stage. What do you make of it? Is it going to be a walkover for one, perhaps?
It should be a steering job in theory, shouldn't it, for third time lucky for the Skelton team? On official figures, has £10 in hand over Do Your Job, has over a stone in hand over the Alex Hales horse. Admittedly, he has to give away £5 carrying a penalty for his earlier successes, but look, no excuses. Ground's going to be fine. I'm a little bit surprised they are running him, in truth, given he's got such a good record fresh. I thought they might just go straight to the Arkle, but they'll want a bit more match practice, perhaps restore his confidence after. I don't think he ran up to his best at Sandown last time out, but look, he's going to get his ground. It's going to be lovely ground at Doncaster, flat galloping track here. I mean, what more can you say? I mean, he's got to run massively below par or make some absolute horlicks of a couple of fences here for a couple of the others to be having a say. I think Do Your Job will win. I think entry might be his bag. Of course, he ran really well there, won there last season, didn't he? And For Pleasure, I think he's getting a bit of practice in here. Of course, he's entitled to the Plumpton Cheltenham 50k bonus, isn't he? So I think they'll be getting a nice run into him, perhaps for eyeing up a handicap at the festival. So look, third time lucky. It's going to be extremely short. He should win bar accidents.
Yeah, nice claiming the prize money there for Dan Skelton and the team. So now we're going to go over to Vincent. We're going to race at Fairyhouse. We want to talk about with you. Just checking in from sunny Spain, Vincent. Let us know first of all how you're doing, and also then take us through this race.
Yeah, well, good. Thanks, Joe. Interesting weekend in Ireland. We've got Fairyhouse Saturday. This meeting was abandoned last year. This year we're looking at good to yielding ground. So it's a very big change in Ireland with the way the weather has been the last few months. So it's an issue for some of these horses. Looking at Cheltenham, particularly on the near frontier, to see whether they can get runs into them. So Fairyhouse, I'm surprised there's so many runners at the meeting. It's a very competitive meeting. Lots of horses running in maidens, particularly. Some of them are pretty low standard. Having said that, Micromanages one of Willie Mullins's that runs in a maiden, which is what we're looking at. They taught a lot of this horse 2 years ago. It'll be interesting to see. He was a very good stayer on the flat. Interesting to see how he gets on in his maiden hurdle. And then the big race at Fairyhouse is the 140. It's the Solerina Mares Novice hurdle. It's a grade 3. And we've basically got most of the Irish contenders for the Mares Novice final in Cheltenham in 6 weeks' time, or 7 weeks' time, whatever, 6.5 weeks' time. So what we have in this is the main contender is Allegory de Vassy, which is the current 9-2 favourite for the Cheltenham race. Allegory de Vassy is a Willie Mullins horse owned by Rich Ritchie, came from France. It had 4 starts in France, didn't win, but ran to a pretty high level. And then when it joined Willie Mullins, it bolted up on its debut on New Year's Day here over the course and distance. It beat another horse that's in the race on Saturday by 11 lengths that day. So it shot to the head of the market for the Mares Novice in Cheltenham and has to be a real contender for that. Obviously, we're going to see what happens at the weekend, because he's or she's 9-2 for the Cheltenham race. Then you have Brandy Love, which is 8-1, which also runs. Grangie, which is 10-1 and also runs. Party Central is a 20-1 chance. Lunar Display at 20 and Braganza 33. So they're all pretty high enough in the betting in the Cheltenham race. So we're going to see a big change in that market after Saturday's race, you'd imagine. Allegory de Vassy should win, all being equal, because the two of the main rivals, Lunar Display and Party Central, both have penalties. And then the other main contenders are all also trained by Willie Mullins. You'd presume his first string would be the one to be picking here. But Allegory de Vassy would probably be a short price to beat these. And if she does that, she'll be a much shorter price for Cheltenham than she is currently at 9-2.
Yeah, well, definitely one to keep an eye on, of course, for the Cheltenham Festival. But Ed, we'll go back to you now, and another race at Doncaster we want to talk about in depth. So Stephen actually is going to take us through this one, the SkyBet Handicap Chase. Big field declared here, so yeah, take us through it, Stephen. Where's the value?
Well, there's 17 runners, Joe. So as we say every week, play with the bookmaker offering the extra places. 4 places is very, very good value, but there'll be probably the sponsor SkyBet will probably be 5 or 6 places. It's well worth shopping around. It's a really open race. I'm going to go for a pretty exposed one in Midnight Shadow. Now, Midnight Shadow, Ed will know well, looking out of his bedroom window, Midnight Shadow runs at every single meeting at Cheltenham. He's been running blinders there the last twice in huge field handicaps. He just finished third last time behind Cool Cody. He is getting on a bit, and he is exposed. Midnight Shadow, not Ed, obviously. But he's bound to give his run here. I thought that Sue Smith had got the entries wrong here and not running him at Cheltenham when Cheltenham's on. But Doncaster could suit him. Those of us who are going grey will remember a horse called Volroy's Clown, who used to fly around Doncaster from the front. It's a very good front runner's track on drying ground. And I think Midnight Shadow, if they can dominate this field, Ryan Mania's booked, he should go really well. I was looking back, he hasn't run at Doncaster for 5 years, and he's only run there once, which was in a bumper when he finished second. So at least he's shown he doesn't mind the track, albeit 5 years ago. I think he's bound to run well. He's probably a good each way bet if you can find a bookmaker offering the extra places.
So yeah, of course, the lesson there as well is looking at the ground, like how important that is for Doncaster and Cheltenham, of course, this weekend. So yeah, it's interesting to see this perspective of the team. Now, Vincent, we're going to go over to you for a couple of races at Naas on Sunday.
Yes, Joe, we haven't got declared runners at the minute. We're looking at the entry stage, but there's a couple of very interesting races. One in particular, from my point of view, is the first race on the card is due to be the 110. It's a 3-mile novice chase. What's interesting here is most of the contenders in it, and some very high-class horses entered here, a lot of them are looking at the 4-miler in Cheltenham, which is now called the National Hunt Chase, which is run the last race on the first day for amateur riders. There's 3 of them here that are high enough in the betting in the Cheltenham race. You've got Statler's a 9-2 chance, On Baton, another Willie Mullins one, is 9-1, and Fakur Devine is 16-1. Those 3 horses are prominent in the Cheltenham betting for the National Hunt Chase, but currently they haven't qualified. They need to run over 3 miles plus over fences, so this is their opportunity. It's a 3-mile novice chase, so that gets them qualified for Cheltenham if they run. Also in this race, we've got the Leopardstown Christmas Grade 1 winner, Fury Road. He'd obviously be a contender here, but the problem is he's got a £10 penalty for the win over the Grade 1 race. So he'll struggle to confirm form with Run Wild Fred, which was 8 lengths back of him that day, and now gets a £10 turnaround for that. You've also got in the race Vanillier, which was third in the race in Leopardstown behind Fury Road and Run Wild Fred. Vanillier, of course, won the Albert Bartlett at Cheltenham last year. Because he's a Grade 2 winner over fences, he won an egg and spoon race in Punchestown a while ago, only a 4-runner race, and there's only a couple of finishers in it. He gets an £8 penalty for that, so he's now £8 worse off of Run Wild Fred, who he was 10 lengths behind the last day in Leopardstown. So realistically, he's no chance of turning that around. I'd be very keen on Run Wild Fred if Gordon runs him here. The question is, will he? That's the issue. I'm not certain he will, but Run Wild Fred for me is one of the bankers of the Cheltenham Festival in that National Hunt Chase. Second in an Irish Grand National, second in a Thyestes, which has actually been run this afternoon. So he was second in that race last year, and then he won the Troytown Chase earlier this year in November, or earlier this season. I'd be very keen on him if he turns up, but it'll be interesting to see what does run, because some of them have to run to qualify for Cheltenham. Then on to the other big race on the card is the Limestone Lad Grade 3 Novice Hurdle. It's not the greatest race ever, but there's an interesting horse in this. Is another one of Gordon's called Saint Felicien. This came from France, and because it had won in France, it's no longer a novice. So it has a champion hurdle entry from Gordon, which would be interesting to see. It'd want to win here and win well to be even considering going for something like a champion hurdle, which it probably has no chance in, even if it does win well here. But it's an interesting race. You've got Durasso in it, has to give away £5. That was 4 to Honeysuckle the last time it ran in the Hatton's Grace. And then you've Cashback, better known as a chaser, but it did win well over hurdles the last day when it beat a very expensive horse of Willie Mullins. It's a stablemate called Classic Getaway. And then we've also got, Gordon has a couple more in it, horses we know well, Felix Leger and Petit Mouchoir, who's been around forever. So it should be a decent race, but Saint Felicien is the one you'd be focusing on there with Cheltenham in mind particularly.
Yeah, so lots of really good racing to look forward to, actually. Obviously, it depends on who gets declared, but yeah, hopefully we'll be keeping an eye on that. And then any pointers that come out of this weekend as well, of course, we will be bringing up next week on Jump to It. All right, let's get to our tips of the week. So poor form last week, but hopefully we're going to turn things around this week. So, Stephen, I'll start with you because you're looking at some of the feature races at Cheltenham with your selections. So give us your breakdown of your best tips for this week.
Yeah, I'm going with Paul Nicholls. Hopefully, they're all over the flu jab and about to bounce back. So in the 155, I really like Magic Saint. who's a horse who's fallen 12 pounds down the weights. He actually got dropped a couple of pounds for finishing fourth last time out behind Vienna Court at Cheltenham. I thought he ran really well there. He was 50-1. The ground was soft enough. The boy, Tom Buckley, was on. He's on again. He's a very good young claimer. He eases the burden of top weight a bit. And Magic Saint will love the good ground. And I'm not sure that's a comment that applies to that many, as Ed touched upon. There's plenty of soft ground form in all these horses. Horses who've gone up the weights for winning and running well on soft ground. And Magic Saint has gone the other way. He's not been running that well on winter ground, and he does need spring ground. He's well handicapped. The key with him is getting him to jump properly. He can make a mistake or two. He did last time, and he weakened out things up the hill, but that was a return to form. And he's a very useful high-class handicapper when the cards fall right. I think he's going to be a double-figure price. You're going to get a fair price because Tom Buckley's on him. I think that does put off a lot of Saturday punters, but as I say, he's a good claimer. I'm pretty confident Magic Saint will run well. And staying at Cheltenham, the 2:30, we've already done the race. I think it's a complete match between Chantry House and Simply the Bets. And at the prices, I think Simply the Bets, again on good ground, running himself into form for Nichols. I think he's the one to side with there.
And this leads us nicely on to Ed and your selection for that race as well. You're going for Chantry House as one of your tips.
Yeah, not normally my style. And taking Stephen on here, I just think he's run one bad race in his life, which was in the King George last time out on really bad ground. He's never looked happy at Kempton, on the tight turns going right-handed. He kept moving, shifting left-handed, a lot of his obstacles, and then Nico de Boinville threw the towel in after half the race, basically. And look, he's got great form at Cheltenham. He's won here twice. He was placed in the Supreme. This is kind of his home track, more of a galloping test. Emphasis on stamina. I suppose you could argue to some extent there is still a question mark about him at this trip, given that his best form has come over shorter, but he's looking very much like myself, Joe, much slower as they're getting older. And I just think this is a straightforward opportunity. Cheap piece is gone for the first time. Nothing exciting, but I just think he'll get the job done and then book his place to the Cheltenham Gold Cup in just over 6 weeks' time. All
right, well, let's move on to your other tips as well, Ed. You've got a couple more for us at bigger prices.
Well, yeah, hopefully in the 12:45, it's the Triumph Hurdle Trial, if you want to call that. Obviously, there'll be a lot of eyes on the Gordon Elliott horse Pied Piper, who's coming over with Davy Russell. But I thought the Nick Williams horse in here, Intern de Savola, has probably been, unfairly dismissed. I mean, he actually bolted up in the December meeting in the Triumph Hurdle Trial on that occasion. Now, when you hear in the aftermath, we got given a very good ride, that's the passive-aggressive form of basically saying, well, he won't win again. That was his day, and there are other horses that'll swamp him. But I actually think if you look back at it, he really did impress me on that occasion. And the form in that race, albeit at lower level, is working out a treat. The runner-up of Gary Moores has since come out and won 20 lengths hard held. And the third of Milton Harris went up to Doncaster and has won again since. So the form does have some substance to it. And again, it's that kind of trainer snobbery a bit. If the words Nick Williams weren't associated with the horse, I think there'd be a bit more hype surrounding him, shall we say. He did it in a very nice style, I thought. And I think he's a strong front-running galloper. And I could see him cause a lot of trouble for a few of these in behind. And he'd probably be I'm hoping it'll be my value angle in here. And then we go over to Doncaster for my final one. I've gone for one of a bit of price here, around the 20-1 mark. Bryony Frost and Paul Nichols team up with Grand Sancy in the SkyBet Chase. Now, this horse is definitely one of interest purely from a handicapping perspective. Horse who wants decent ground, something that Stephen touched upon a few of these Nichols types. He wants decent ground. He's plummeted in the weights. He had a peak rating of 152 over fences. He's down to 136. Bryony on 10 stone 7. But the crucial point about this horse, Joe, is he cannot go right-handed. And for whatever reason, they ran him at Ascot last time and he was nearly jumping out into the car park on every occasion. He's got to go left-handed. I think he's a player here. Upton Trip on his penultimate start in Newbury over 2-6. He started to stay on in the closing stages. Like I said, based on form of 18 months ago, he's a stone well in. And I think he's a huge price, shall we say. And again, check your each way concessions. But Grand Sancy runs into the top 5 or 6 at 20-1. I'm far from surprised.
And of course, the recommendation is to go lower stakes with that one, just because it's such a big outsider. But yeah, really good stuff, Ed. Best of luck for your tips. Vincent, over to you to round us off with your tips for this weekend.
Thanks, Joe. Well, I've just got the two. One of them is due to run Sunday, is Run Wild Fred, which I've discussed already in that Novice Chase. If he turns up there, he's got a rating of 158. He's getting a lot of weight off two of his main rivals, Fury Road and Vanillier. I'd expect him to win. I also expect him to win in Cheltenham. So if he does turn up, you'd like to see him win if you're fancying him for Cheltenham. So he's runs in the 110 and Naas if he turns up on Sunday. The other one does run. It's on Saturday in Fairyhouse. It's a horse called the Blind Piper. Not what you'd expect me to be tipping here, a 9-year-old to win a maiden hurdle, but this is no ordinary 9-year-old, no ordinary maiden hurdle is the bottom line. It's a maiden hurdle for horses that have never finished in the first three on the racecourse. And there's some very poor opposition here. It's a big field, but they really are some very poor horses. The Blind Piper has just missed out from finishing third a couple of times. He finished fourth twice. He's trained by a woman called Michelle Gannon, who's more into point-to-pointers. She's from down in County Kilkenny, be ridden by Ian Power. But this horse is very well bred, and the thing is, it won 2 point-to-points. So it's a dual winner coming here in a very poor race. I'd be surprised if this isn't involved here and if it doesn't win. It looks like a very poor race on paper, unless there's something lurking here with a few duck eggs that hasn't been trying, but I can't find one. I think the Blind Piper is definitely worth a bet.
Great stuff. Well, yeah, you found some really decent pick there, Vincent, and well argued for your point as well. So best of luck for your tips. Now that wraps it up for this edition of Jump to It. Of course, if you are going to be placing a bet, please do gamble responsibly. Be sure to check out Mondays as well, because we'll be releasing another Cheltenham Anti-Post special. But for now, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.